Let me ask you a question. If I could show you how to make a hand-painted, not stenciled, replica of a vintage sign, would you watch? Well, yeah, you would, because that's why you're here. But before we get started, this isn't your typical DIY how-to channel. I'm not here just to show you how to make this. I'm here to show you that this can be done by someone with only 10% use of their hands. In this video, I'll show you the 5 steps it takes to turn a piece of plywood like this into a sign that looks like it's been hanging around for half a century. You're going to see how I create the design and template, prepare the work surface, hand paint the lettering, make a frame, and finish it off so it's ready to be hung up. Okay, let's get started and you'll see what this quad can do. People ask me all the time, how did you do that? So, I figured it's time to show you. I've been making hand-painted signs for about 10 years. This particular one is a tribute to my grandpa and my uncle, who owned the Whalen and Berry 5 and Dime store in Roselle Park, New Jersey from the 1940s through the early 90s. After contemplating in my mind what I want it to look like, I start out on the computer and lay out a couple of designs to choose from. There are many different programs to create and design. I use Publisher since that's what I'm accustomed to, and for time's sake, I won't go over every detail. After the design is saved as an image, I upload it to blockposter.com, a free site which enables you to adjust the design to whatever size you want and then save it as a printable PDF. I personally like Blockposter mainly because there's a 1/4-inch border making it easier to tape the pages together for the template. Depending on the size, this can be a little tedious since you have to be sure that the pages overlap just right for the letters to line up. In reality though, for a sign like this, it doesn't have to be perfect since it's going to have a worn and weathered look when it's all finished. For this project, I'm using a leftover piece of 1/4-inch plywood. I wasn't sure how much of the wood was going to show through once the surface was painted, so I opted to give it a coat of stain to darken the wood a little. Depending on the look you're going for, you could skip this step. Once the stain was dried, I could start applying the base coat of paint. Since this is going to be a simple black and white sign, I'm only going to be using white for the base. As you can see, I'm not trying to cover the entire board with the first coat. Once that dried, I add another light coat, mainly to blend it all together, but still letting some of the grain show through. Bonus tip: use a hairdryer to help speed up the dry time, especially if the humidity level is higher than 50%. Now that the paint is dry, it's time to lay out the template and get that set in place. For this sign, I initially wanted the black border to be an equal distance all around, so I measured out and marked the same distance between the top and the bottom of the board. You'll also want to find the center of the board and line up the center of the template to mark as well. Once you have your marks, start with taping the corners down. Double check to make sure everything is lined up and then add more tape across the top of the template. To transfer the design to the board, I found the easiest way to do this is by using carbon transfer paper. Find a starting point and begin tracing the image until you have gone over the entire template. Be sure to use adequate pressure when tracing. Here's another tip. For a sign this size, all you need is 1 sheet of carbon paper. By having the masking tape across only the top, you can lift the template and move the carbon paper easily, and it also allows you to see if the transfer is showing on the board. Once transferred, the template can be removed. As you can see, the image is now on the board and we're ready to begin the next step. So we're about halfway through the video, and I truly appreciate you sticking around to watch. Would you do me a favor? If you haven't done so already, would you hit the thumbs up like button below? And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do that as well. Okay, back to what you came here for. You can use any type of paint you'd like, but I tend to use acrylics mainly because it washes off with soap and water. I don't need a lot of black, primarily because it will be going on fairly lightly. You'll see as we move along. Dip your brush and it's time to start painting. I'm left-handed, so I work from right to left in order to not smear the paint. Find a starting point and start filling in the lines. I learned from a lot of trial and error that for this type of sign, you don't have to follow the lines perfectly, nor does it have to be fully filled in. By not loading your brush with a lot of paint, you'll actually start to get those coveted faded brush lines that typically take years after signs are exposed to the elements. I used to take careful consideration during this step of painting, being sure that it was precise, and then going over the letters with sandpaper to give that distressed look. This not only adds more steps in time, but when working with black and white, the sign would end up having a gray tint. Hence, problem solved. For smaller letters, I like to use paint pens instead of a brush. Here I'm using a medium-tipped paint pen, which makes filling in the letters a breeze. What's nice about using plywood, especially if the texture is a little rough, is that as the pins go across the grain, it skips a little bit, which allows some of the white to still peek through. Once the words at the bottom were finished, I used a T-square and a fine point paint pen to make sure the bottom and top edges of the letters were all aligned with each other. You could also use a basic ruler with a couple of pieces of tape so it doesn't move. My original design had a black line going all the way around, but I decided to only do a line along the bottom. I wanted this to be as straight as possible, so I run 2 pencil lines using a speed square, and then using some painter's tape to make a frame. Then using a light amount of paint, I fill in the space and remove the tape. I'll be using 2 furring strips to make the frame. These are 1.5 inches wide, and being that the plywood is only 1/4 inch thick, I'm adding some pieces of 3/4 inch pine scraps to the back. After cutting the pieces to fit, add some glue, line up the edges and clamp in place. Depending on the brand, the glue sets in 30 to 60 minutes and the clamps can be removed. The furring strips are a little rough, so I'd suggest going over them with a piece of 60 or 80 grit sandpaper to remove any potential splinters. Measure the length and width of the plywood and cut the furring strips. The side pieces will cover the exposed ends, so be sure to account for the thickness of the top and bottom strips, which are each 3/4 of an inch. What I love about making these signs is that I can be as creative as I choose to be. For this one, I wanted the frame to create a shadow box effect, so I painted the portion facing the inside black. The remaining 3 sides get painted white. Don't forget the hairdryer trick to speed up the drying time. I'm using a brad nailer to attach the frame. If you don't have one, don't worry, a basic hammer and nails will work too. I wouldn't use screws, mainly because I think it would take away from the aesthetics. I can't tell you how many times I've started to attach a frame and it moves ever so slightly, so I find it easier to use clamps to hold the wood in place. In addition, if the furring strip is bowed a little, the clamps help in pulling it in tight. Shoot in the nails all around until all the frame pieces are attached. I didn't mind the broken piece on the corner of the plywood since it adds to the worn look, but I didn't like the brown showing through, so to fix that, I just add a drop of black paint and cover up the brown. The ends get a little touch up of white paint, and for whatever reason, one side was a bit longer, so I took a handsaw and cut it flush. You can see here how the sides overlap at the top and bottom, which is why we needed that extra 1.5 inches earlier. We're almost done. To finish it off, I'm applying a spray polyurethane just to add a layer of protection to the paint. For this sign, there's no need to add hangers on the back since the frame creates a little ledge to set on the screws. I really like the way it turned out. It's a simple design, yet it has a lot of meaning behind it for me and my family. Hey friend, thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, check out this video and subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest.